Over the years, there is one conversation I find myself returning to again and again. It is not only about why avoidants withdraw, what their silence means, or how someone heals after experiencing emotional distance. Those discussions are important, and they always will be. But there is another question that people ask far more quietly. It is often the one they carry long after the relationship has ended. They want to know whether the avoidant truly formed a genuine emotional bond. They wonder if the connection they experienced was as meaningful to the other person as it felt to them, or if it was something far more casual that could easily be left behind. This uncertainty often becomes even more painful than the breakup itself. Many people remember moments that felt deeply authentic, moments of closeness that seemed unlike anything they had experienced before. Then the distance arrived, the silence followed, and suddenly their mind began creating a completely different story. They questioned whether any of it had ever been real. They found themselves trapped between two experiences that seemed impossible to reconcile. One part of them remembered a relationship filled with genuine emotional connection. The other part saw behavior that appeared emotionally detached and easy to walk away from. Those two realities felt impossible to hold at the same time. Today, I want to help resolve that conflict, not by offering empty reassurance, but by looking at the psychological signs that often accompany genuine bonding in someone with avoidant tendencies. Because avoidant bonding rarely looks like secure bonding. If you are searching for the wrong signs, you can overlook the real evidence countless times without ever realizing what you are seeing. Before we explore those signs, we first need to understand what emotional bonding actually feels like for someone with avoidant patterns. For many securely attached people, emotional closeness develops gradually. Trust grows over time. Vulnerability slowly becomes easier. The relationship deepens in a way that feels natural and welcome. For someone with avoidant tendencies, the experience can be very different. Deep emotional attachment often feels less like comfort and more like losing control. Their protective walls were not created by accident. They were built over many years through repeated emotional experiences that taught them closeness could eventually lead to pain. Those defenses become part of how they move through relationships. When someone finally reaches beyond those walls and forms a genuine emotional connection, it can feel deeply unsettling inside them, not because the relationship is unhealthy, but because their internal system was never designed to welcome that level of closeness. Instead of experiencing only excitement, they may also experience fear, emotional pressure, and uncertainty. It can feel as though another person has quietly become an important part of their inner world without them fully understanding how it happened. That is why their expressions of attachment often appear indirect, hesitant, or even confusing. They rarely communicate emotional bonding in obvious ways. Instead, it often reveals itself through subtle behaviors that become meaningful once you know what to notice. One of the first signs often appears through unexpected self-disclosure. Instead of openly saying they feel deeply attached, they may quietly admit something about themselves that they rarely share with others. You might hear statements such as, "I'm not very good at relationships. I've always been better on my own. I don't really know how to do this." Or, "I'm probably going to make mistakes." At first, these comments may sound casual or even self-critical. Yet beneath the surface, they often carry much greater emotional significance. Sharing personal limitations in this way requires trust. Rather than presenting themselves as completely independent, they briefly allow you to see an insecurity they usually keep hidden. Notice what happens after they say something like this. Often there is a quiet pause. They watch your response carefully, even if they never admit they are doing so. They are silently asking an important question without speaking it directly. Can I show this vulnerable part of myself and still feel emotionally safe? If you respond with patience instead of pressure, with understanding instead of trying to fix them, something meaningful often happens inside their nervous system. They begin learning that vulnerability does not automatically lead to rejection, criticism, or losing themselves. That moment may appear small on the surface, yet it can strengthen emotional trust in ways that are difficult to recognize at the time. Another powerful sign appears through memory. Sometimes an avoidant unexpectedly recalls something you mentioned weeks or even months earlier during what seemed like an ordinary conversation. They repeat your exact words, remember a small detail, or bring up something you had long forgotten saying. To you, it may seem surprising because the original conversation felt completely unremarkable. Yet, the fact that they remembered it reveals something important. Avoidants do not usually hold on to every personal detail from every interaction. When someone becomes emotionally significant, those memories often remain with them long after the conversation ends. They revisit those moments privately, thinking about them in ways they rarely discuss openly. Their memory becomes evidence that your words continued living inside their thoughts, even when nothing was being said between you. This quiet attention often says far more than dramatic declarations ever could. It reflects an emotional investment that is expressed internally rather than publicly. Understanding these patterns does not guarantee what another person feels, nor should it ever replace healthy communication. But it does remind us that genuine attachment can sometimes appear in subtle ways that are easily overlooked when we expect love to always look obvious, expressive, and direct. Sometimes the deepest emotional bonds reveal themselves not through grand speeches, but through the quiet moments that only someone who truly carries you inside their inner world would remember. When they bring up a detail you had almost forgotten, yet they remember it with remarkable accuracy, something important may be happening beneath the surface. They are not simply recalling information. They are revealing that your thoughts, your stories, and your inner world have continued living quietly in their own mind long after the conversation ended. That kind of memory is rarely accidental. It often reflects the fact that your presence has become emotionally significant to them in ways they may never openly describe. They carried those words with them because they kept returning to them in private moments, not necessarily every day and not obsessively, but often enough that your conversations became part of their inner life. When someone begins holding your experiences with that level of quiet attention, it can suggest that the relationship has moved beyond ordinary interest. Your place in their emotional world has become meaningful, even if their outward behavior sometimes appears distant. This is one of the reasons avoidant attachment can feel so confusing. What they continue processing internally may look completely different from what they express externally. Their silence does not always reveal what occupies their thoughts. Their emotional investment often exists in private long before it becomes visible in words or actions. That difference between their internal experience and their outward behavior is what leaves so many people questioning whether the connection was ever real in the first place. Another subtle sign appears when they unexpectedly include you in their future. This often happens so naturally that most people never realize its importance. They may casually mention wanting to show you a favorite place someday. They might talk about a future trip and naturally picture you there. They may describe an experience they hope the two of you will eventually share without making a dramatic declaration about the relationship itself. For someone with secure attachment, imagining a shared future usually feels completely natural. It happens almost automatically as emotional closeness grows. For someone with avoidant tendencies, however, this often carries much greater emotional weight. Many avoidants build their identity around independence. Their future is something they unconsciously imagine handling alone, remaining emotionally self-sufficient regardless of who enters or leaves their life. When they begin placing you inside those future images, something meaningful has shifted. They are no longer imagining only themselves. Your presence has quietly become part of the life they envision moving forward. They may never announce this directly because doing so feels emotionally exposing. Instead, it slips naturally into conversation, almost as though they do not realize they have revealed something deeply personal. Yet those small future references often reflect an emotional bond that is already formed beneath the surface. Another important sign appears when they share something they rarely reveal to anyone else. It does not always involve dramatic confessions or life-changing secrets. Often it is something much quieter. A childhood memory they have never spoken about, a private insecurity, a hidden fear, a deeply personal opinion, a part of themselves they normally protect from almost everyone around them. What makes this moment meaningful is not necessarily what they share, but the fact that they chose to share it with you. People with avoidant tendencies usually guard their inner world very carefully. Letting someone see behind those emotional walls requires a level of trust that does not develop easily. Even then, they often soften the moment with humor, quickly change the subject, or minimize what they just revealed, giving themselves an emotional escape if the vulnerability feels too uncomfortable afterward. Yet, beneath that hesitatio, the final sign is a little different from the others. The earlier examples were mostly revealed through words. This one is expressed through actions, although the language surrounding those actions often makes it even more meaningful. It is the quiet protection that appears without ever being requested. When an avoidant has formed a genuine emotional bond, something often changes in the way they pay attention to your well-being. It usually happens naturally and without much conscious thought. They begin noticing practical details about your life. They remember what makes your day easier. They quietly look for ways to reduce your stress, solve small problems, or help you without being asked. These actions are often thoughtful, personal, and based on a deep understanding of your needs. Yet immediately afterward, they tend to minimize what they have done. They might say, "It wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have done that," or "It took no effort at all." Listen carefully to that response. The action itself often reveals genuine care, while the words attempt to make it appear ordinary. Someone who feels little emotional investment usually has no reason to downplay their kindness because there is nothing emotionally significant to hide. Someone who is bonded, however, may instinctively soften the meaning of their actions because openly acknowledging how much they care feels emotionally vulnerable. The behavior expresses the truth. The minimizing words become the emotional protection surrounding it. If you ever find yourself wondering which part to trust more, pay close attention to the consistency of their actions rather than only the modest explanations that follow them. Now, I want to address something that is extremely important because understanding these signs also carries a risk. Learning about precision memories, future references, deeply personal disclosures, quiet protection, and emotionally charged withdrawal can provide answers that many people have searched for over a very long time. After months or even years of uncertainty, finally understanding that the connection may have been emotionally real can feel deeply comforting. But there is a danger if that understanding becomes the reason you remain emotionally attached to a relationship that is no longer healthy for you. These signs can help confirm that your experience was meaningful. They can reassure you that you were not imagining the emotional depth you sensed. They can explain why certain moments felt unforgettable and why the relationship affected you so profoundly. But they cannot answer a different question that matters just as much. Can this person consistently build the kind of relationship you deserve today? Emotional bonding and emotional readiness are not the same thing. Someone can genuinely care, genuinely love, and still lack the emotional skills necessary to create a relationship built on trust, stability, consistency, accountability, and healthy communication. All of those realities can exist together at the same time. Accepting that complexity is difficult, but it is often the most honest way to understand avoidant relationships. The bond may have been completely real. The love may have been completely real. the emotional limitations may also have been completely real. Recognizing all three truths allows you to move forward with clarity instead of becoming trapped between hope and confusion. As we finish this discussion, I want to leave you with what may be the most important perspective of all. Discovering that someone formed a genuine bond with you does not reduce what you deserve from a relationship. It does not require you to wait for them. It does not ask you to sacrifice your emotional well-being while hoping they eventually become capable of expressing what they feel. What this understanding changes is something much more personal. It changes the story you tell yourself about your own judgment. Many people leave avoidant relationships believing they completely misunderstood everything. They question whether they imagined the connection. They wonder if their intuition failed them. They begin doubting their ability to recognize genuine emotional closeness. That self-doubt can become one of the deepest wounds left behind. But perhaps your intuition was not wrong at all. Perhaps you recognized a bond that truly existed, even if the other person struggled to carry it in healthy ways. Your ability to feel emotional depth was never the mistake. Your willingness to love sincerely was never the problem. The relationship became painful because emotional connection alone cannot overcome unhealed fears or replace the work of personal growth. Those are challenges only the other person can choose to face. What belongs to you is something far more valuable. You can continue trusting your capacity to recognize meaningful connection while also learning to expect consistency, emotional availability, mutual effort, and genuine security. Those qualities are not too much to ask for. They are the foundation of a healthy relationship. Your ability to bond deeply is not a weakness that needs to be guarded against. It is one of your greatest strengths. The next chapter of your life is not about becoming less loving. It is about finding someone who is equally capable of remaining present when love becomes deeper instead of retreating from it. That is the kind of connection your heart has deserved all along. And lies something important. They allowed you into a part of themselves that very few people ever reach. Every small piece of openness represents a section of emotional protection being lowered. Those moments may seem ordinary while they are happening, but they often carry enormous psychological meaning because they reveal trust developing where fear once stood. Perhaps the most misunderstood signal of all appears during moments of withdrawal. This is where many people become confused because the very behavior that hurts them most can sometimes reveal the depth of the emotional struggle taking place inside the avoidant. There is a difference between ordinary emotional distance and the kind of retreat that happens after a genuine bond has formed. In more casual relationships, avoidance often creates space without much explanation. They simply become less available. But when someone has become deeply important, the withdrawal may become much more personal. They might say things like, "You make me feel too much," "Being with you feels overwhelming," or "I can't handle what this relationship brings up inside me." Notice the difference. The explanation is no longer about relationships in general. It becomes specifically connected to you and the emotional impact you have on them. That does not mean those statements should be interpreted as invitations to stay in an unhealthy relationship, nor do they justify emotional inconsistency or hurtful behavior. Rather, they sometimes reveal that the emotional intensity has become greater than their current coping abilities. They are not simply reacting to the idea of closeness. They are reacting to the closeness they experience with you specifically. Understanding this distinction can help you see the situation with greater clarity. It reminds you that emotional significance and emotional readiness are not always the same thing. Someone can genuinely form a deep bond while still lacking the skills necessary to sustain that connection in a healthy, secure, and emotionally consistent way.